Rose is a water microbiologist and winner of the 2016 Stockholm Water Prize. Her research focuses on pathogen surveillance, removal of pathogens by water and wastewater treatment, along with the application of new molecular methods. Today, one of the things she'll be talking about is One Water, One Health.
Thanks so much. Wow, I was inspired by the musical presentation, and then, you know, with young people like Genevieve looking at this in a new way and looking for solutions, it makes me feel really good. So I'll get started, and I hope I'll be quick, and if we have some time then for some discussion or questions, we'll move along. Now, Genevieve put health, and I'm a public health water microbiologist at the center, and because I work in water, I put water, of course, at the center. And I do think water is at the core of our sustainability for our planetary health. We know that this is the blue planet. And water quality, many people say, well, water is life. But people stay where there's water, even if it's polluted. When there's no water, they either perish or they move. There's climate migration, right? So, and it's affecting, our ecosystems and our security, our sustainability, our economics. And I was thinking, and I hope that, and I said this last night at the dinner, and I want to thank the community here for inviting me last night to the wonderful dinner, and the guardians that the presentations you made to your community. I think that's fantastic. And I said last night, the first part of this talk, the first few minutes are going to be sort of this, what I'm worried about, what keeps me up at night, the concerns we have. But I hope that the second part will be, back to what Genevieve said, the solutions, that future outlook. So, if we don't do anything, a water-stressed future awaits us. I like this picture. This is a seaweed, a glob of seaweed that could be seen from outer space that bloomed last year, and it washed up on not all the Florida beaches, but quite a few of them. And then they found, skin-eating bacteria in the seaweed. So it was, it was an ecological disaster. You could see it from space. That's how big it was, and a public health issue. And it just exemplifies how this is all connected. And we're creating more gaps between the haves, the have-nots. 60% of the major rivers around the world and coastlines are considered as polluted. We have increasing hazardous algal blooms. Sorry if I put these acronyms up there. So HAVs are the algal blooms that we get that are hazardous to human and animal health. And we're getting more of those, more outbreaks and diseases. We've lost biodiversity, we've lost species, and food insecurity has increased, and economic vitality of our waterways, where we live, where we play, where we work, where we, how we bring people, to our communities during the summer or during the winter. We've lost some of that. And we have all these headlines that we're seeing. Of course, you've seen PFAS and these forever chemicals in the news lately. They are trying to get the standards that will help protect health, but this means over the next 5 to 10 years, utilities and wastewater utilities, drinking water utilities are going to have to be measuring this and removing it. But we also have other contaminants, industrial impacts, headlines about water security. And last year, when they evaluated the Michigan beaches, the study found about 43% of the beaches were contaminated with poop. I usually say like fecal contamination. That sounds more scientific, but yeah, poop. And of course, we've got plastics showing up. Now, we know some of these stressors, and these are big stressors, right? There's land use change. We've changed our landscape. We've lost our wetlands. Michigan had a lot of wetlands. I came from Florida 21 years ago. Florida was very similar to Michigan. Big coastline, important coastline, a wetland state, and we lost our wetlands. And so, of course, climate change is always brought up, and I listened to the national security advisor for President Biden the other day, and she runs the climate program, and she said, when we talk about climate, we're talking about water, and we don't say that enough. And so we've got increased pollution with these rainfall events. It drives pollution. And then we just have inadequate infrastructure. And I always worry about our small communities and our rural communities being left out of, you know, these infrastructure bills and the money, right, coming back to improve things. Now, fecal contamination is a problem around the world. And it's much more disastrous in other places, but we are seeing pockets of this problem in the US, and right here, of course, in Michigan. Septic tanks, failing septic tanks are a problem, and that's a picture right from Michigan. But we have with climate, when climate changes, wastewater plants are overwhelmed. And, you know, we're pretty smart. I mean, the engineering community is pretty smart. We built our wastewater plants downstream so we could use gravity and not energy to move water, use water to move our waste from our community to a place where we could treat it. Well, that means all the rainwater moves that way too. So they are get inundated with these floods. And of course, around the world, they have very inadequate infrastructure. There's no access to sanitation. And this, the recent studies from the United Nations said that there is a direct relationship to when you have better sanitation, you have increased economics in your community and education and all of those kinds of things. Agricultural environments are also a big challenge. We've got a tension between our rural communities and producing food, and we know about egg prices and we know about what we're paying at the grocery store. It's a problem. But and there's a fecal pollution, there's a manure pollution that has some solutions on the agricultural environment, and of course they're very stressed when it rains, these environments, because they run off, and in Michigan they run off to our drainage ditches and then off to the rivers and off to the lakes. And, you know, this is not just affecting, of course, we're not just worried about the human health interface there, but the animal health. And it's, of course, very worried about our cattle, our sheep, our chickens, and their health. You don't want to have salmonella and get that in the eggs that you're selling. So you've got to be very cautious about that. But then we have our wildlife health. And in many cases, we don't actually even understand all the disease and how it's spreading in our wildlife and how that interfaces with the rural community. And these are what we call zoonotic pathogens, pathogens that move from humans to animals or animals to humans. And we have a lot of those, and in fact, they've shown that the emerging diseases are zoonotic. And we've got global hotspots, and of course, everybody knows about COVID-19 and SARS. That's an example of a zoonotic pathogen that jumped from animals into humans. Of course, we're hearing about bird flu right now. Not such a high risk because only a few people in the whole United States have really been able to have contracted bird flu from the birds that are sick. But it's always something like SARS that is very, you know, robust and capable of jumping, right, from one animal to the humans. And this is not new. Michigan has these challenges. We have, I'm going to, you know, focus on this issue of the stormwater and our fecal pollution. You can see the graphs up here and the pictures. Combined sewer overflows, we've got to fix those, but then we've got to think about how do we fix them? Do we bring all the stormwater into our wastewater plants and increase the flow, the ability to treat that high flow, and we have that technology? That's one option. The other option is to separate it out, but then you still have to think about how you treat your stormwater, because stormwater can still carry a lot of different things. This is our septic tank map. And in Michigan, and we do not have a state sanitary code. We are trying to put a bill, or Representative Skaggs is one of the leads on putting a bill forward to have a statewide approach and policy to assessment and solutions so that it's not fragmented. What you'll see by this map too is we grew out our urban communities with septic tanks. We did not invest in the infrastructure. And we grew out our communities where people like to have second homes are now moving into full-time homes around our lakes, Higgins Lakes and other places that are stressed, with septic tanks. And now we've got to go back, which is much more expensive, and retrofit. And it's fragmented. Who's doing what? Some communities are ahead of others in trying to get the resources. The local community cannot afford also the bill. We've got to have support from the state and federal government for our water and wastewater infrastructure. This is a 100-year investment. And we just heard about the bridge, right? And then the Biden administration said, we're going to come help you with this bridge. It's important. We need to say our water infrastructure is equally important. When you put it all together nationally, it's not just this little community and this little community. We start adding this all up, it's going to be very important. And that means we're going to modernize. Michigan's going to be a great place to live. We're going to still warm up, I think, and we've got water, and people want to come here, and it's a great place to live. People are moving back. You know, we want to be a modern place that is environmentally sustainable for the future. This is our map on the right-hand side here of our wastewater plants. Kind of looks like a measles map. And our wastewater plants, some of them do better than others in terms of really looking at taking out the contaminants of concern now. They've got to think about PFAS and in their sludges. Better disinfection so that they're taking out viruses and things that affect our beaches. And then really looking at resource recovery. How do we get ammonia that we put into the wastewater back out to use for fertilizer? It's a circular economy, so people are really starting to think about that. Why not be the showcase for that in Michigan as we start to modernize our systems? And I think it's possible. This is our beaches. These are some of our beaches we monitor right here in the center. And we have, I've worked with Dr. Shannon Briggs since I got here, and she's an Eagle, and she works with the local health departments, and they run the beach program. 500 some beaches in Michigan, and they've identified the beaches that have chronic problems, are continually red, those that are, yellow, part of the time problems, and really starting to look at solutions there. And of course, we've had these outbreaks. We've had these outbreaks of, and in our neighboring communities, you probably remember Walkerton, which was so disastrous with young children dying from a drink from their tap water with E. coli 0157 and suffering because of Campylobacter and arthritis. And we've had cryptosporidium outbreaks, norovirus outbreaks, Legionella in Flint. So these are things we know. These are the plane crashes, right? We don't want to have any more of these plane crashes if we can avoid them. So I'm going to end by the next 10 minutes talking about solutions and where we go to chat. You know, these seems like, oh, this is so daunting, right? But it is about one community at a time, and then the communities coming together and working on policies that over time, and we've got to have a long view, we've got to be persistent and consistent. And I think that we will see, we'll look back in 10 years and say, look what we've accomplished, right? So we've got to think about that long term. So why is the One Water, One Health the way to go? Because One Health talks about the health of the environment, the health of animals, and the health of humans, the planetary health. And it starts to look at those linkages. What does One Water do? One Water starts to look, drinking water is not separate from what we do with wastewater. When we use drinking water, it goes into our wastewater system. Wastewater is not separate from climate and stormwater. And we're not separated from our rural communities, irrigation needs, and groundwater. We're a groundwater state. A lot of us use groundwater, right? And so the One Water says, how do we look at all of the waters and how they're connected, and then link that to the health? So we're really focusing on this One Water, One Health. And there's an international effort to really start to use new tools. And, I always say, and I took this from my good friend up in Wisconsin in School of Public Health and Department of Health up there. They coined this during the cryptosporidium outbreak in '93, but they're the CSI of water. Because, like in that show, we can take water samples and we can look at the DNA in the water. And we can start to look at where did the pollution come from? How is it linked to the disease in the animals, the humans? And so we're calling these the genetic fecal pollution diagnostics, and this is expanding around the world. And so it's being used in small watersheds, large watersheds, and very large projects. The International Joint Commission, which is the commission that was formed in the late 1800s to look at the waterways at the border between Canada and the United States, has recently been working on how do we do a Great Lakes study. Believe it or not, one of the best studies done on water pollution was done in 1910 in the Great Lakes. They left out Lake Michigan because they didn't think that was part of the boundary waters, so they didn't know then, but now Lake Michigan is included, so that's good. But that was the best study ever done. They set up 19 new labs, the best equipment and method at the time in the 1900s, and they did 60,000 samples and put that together in a book with handwritten, I call it GIS, handwritten maps, beautiful work. We want to repeat that with all our modern tools and technologies, and that's what the IJC is talking about right now. Can we do that in the future? They found that we can start to link these heavy storms, climate, to health, and make some decisions and actually get the word out to warn people about coming exposed. And better monitoring, we know that data, that science, if we feed it, if we translate our science appropriately, we can help with the decision making that has to be done at the community level, the public health level, to improve our health. Now, I'm really proud of what Michigan's done. We've built a network of Michigan Advanced qPCR labs. Now, what's qPCR? That's short for quantitative polymerase chain reaction, and that's why we say PCR. Now, what is that? That's a copy machine. We've actually got an instrument in our lab. It can copy DNA like a copy machine does. So we can take the water sample, we can look for the genes that we're interested in, we can copy them. Once we copy them, we can find them in these water samples. So it's amazing this instrument has come along. We're the first state in the US to actually set up in the whole state, covering the whole state, labs that have gotten the machines, been trained, have education, videos, student training, working with other universities. There's university labs, there's private labs, and there's government labs. Each lab has a collaboration with the health department and with some utilities so that you can go out and start to look at the problems. Now, what they started with, this advanced technologies in Michigan for water quality, was the rapid beach assessment. Because of these problems we had at the beach, and E. coli culture, which is what we use, we take a water sample, we take it to the lab, we grow it, and the next day we say, oh, by the way, the water you were swimming in yesterday was polluted. So it's not, it's really not the best for rapid, assessment. PCR is. So what we can do is get the water sample in the morning. By noon, we could say whether the beach has too high levels. And so they had to do a relationship between the culture method, which is the state standard, and the PCR. They worked with EPA. They came up with a number that's accepted by the state. And all the labs were trained, quality assurance. The results are trusted now to take this rapid qPCR E. coli monitoring on. Now they've moved because the same instrument can be used for source tracking. So these new genetic targets, whoa, where are they coming from? And now pathogen monitoring. We've done studies now at 64 watersheds. This is unfortunately not the Upper Peninsula, but just the Lower Peninsula. And about 84% of the drainage from the land. So you know how watersheds are, and you take the sample at the spigot, right? So taking this sample down here, we've looked at these watersheds, and we looked at all different kinds of land use, and lo and behold, the increasing human marker was found in watersheds with increasing septic tanks. This study was done about 7 years ago, and this is some of the data that the state is using, and some of the our representatives are using to say we need a standardized approach. We've also done the animal markers, and as you can imagine, this is the cow, there's the cow on the left and the pig on the right. Well, in the winter, we don't find many of the markers. Here and there we find them in these watersheds, but after it rains, they're kind of everywhere. But we can also get their concentrations. So yes, we can find them, but where are they on the yardstick? From manure to dilution in water. The MyNet program has evolved. This is what we call ourselves now, the Michigan Network for Environmental Health and Technology. And it's built capacity in Michigan for implementing advanced methods. And 30 beaches have been identified, its sources completed, and remediation. 19 beaches have not ongoing investigations. But guess what? 103 more to go that are in that red or yellow, right? Our other beaches are great. And MyNet formation also moved into COVID surveillance. And so we now have almost 19 labs across the state. They can monitor wastewater to see what's happening with the health of the individuals, because you excrete these pathogens in your feces and they end up in wastewater. So we can tell when it's going up when it's coming down, what variants are there, what vaccines are needed. Public health gets the information and makes decisions about how to mobilize communications, vaccine, and testing, especially for people at high risk. And this is what the MyNet program looks like now. And universities are very involved, university labs. They work directly with wastewater utilities and health departments. Some health departments have set up and have their own labs. And then we've got the private industry involved. And so right now, we're monitoring 430 sites for 40,000 samples and results reported. Now, I know I only have a couple more minutes, so I just want to talk about what universities are doing. And we are collaborating with other universities around the state, and they're all doing great stuff. But of course, I'm going to promote Go Green, Go White. And we just formed the MSU Water Alliance. And this alliance is a bridging organization. We want to bridge our faculty. We have great faculty, 300 to 400 faculty working on water issues. And our goal is to bridge our own faculty so that they can do more integrated work together, but also do more outreach and extension, work with extension, and connect with our stakeholders and be solution-oriented. This is who we are. And I love this because the students, we had workshops and said, what do we like to do? What's driving us? What are our interests? What are our expertise? But the students put the figure together. They got it once we started talking. So what are our drivers? And we've already mentioned these: climate change, water quality, engagement, environmental justice, and scale. So backyard to global. What do we want to do? What applications? We want our data and our technology to be useful and effective. We want to translate our science into action. And finally, where are we finding our outcomes? Where are we coalescing? And we're calling these hubs, kind of like transportation hubs, where the science can move back and forth and take new ideas and take new people to the new problems that are very multifaceted, right? So we want to supply sustainable food, water, and energy. We want to sustain aquatic ecosystems and build resilience. And we want to ensure water security for a healthy people, animals, and planet. We've also got an educational program for graduate students that just started. And this is to take the new data science world, AI, remote learning, machine learning, sensor technology, all the new data science, and bring it together with water science, all the water science we're doing, but with an ethical lens. With a lens through the problems that we're seeing in our society. So we're very excited about this new Water Cubed and we're looking at collaborating with other universities that want their undergraduates then to come into a program like this for graduate school. So why am I optimistic at the end of the day with all these problems? And it's because I do think we have people that really care. They're passionate. We've got young people that are interested. They're looking for the new solutions, the new innovations. And I do think that if we work together, as you've all been talking about last night and today, that we will be able to have a better future in terms of water and our economic prosperity, especially in a place like Michigan, where water is so important to our well-being and our spirituality. Thank you so much. Obviously, there's things individuals can do, right? If we have our own septic tank, make sure we're maintaining those, the whole idea of recycling, I think that was highlighted here in this community, not getting those plastics out, the macro that turns into microplastics, making sure we're doing our own part. But I think also on the bigger level, getting involved. I thought it was interesting, and I think this community, if we polled you, you'd be much more informed. But maybe it goes, Genevieve, to the comment you were making. 60 to 70% of people don't know where their water comes when they turn on their tap. Even when it's coming from their own well, which I thought was kind of interesting. Even more don't know where the water goes when they flush their toilet. So they don't have any knowledge about the water system, that's supplying their own household. And I think if we learn more about that, know more about that, we're going to be, better informed and get involved in, are there policies that you can get behind, groups you can be involved with, that help with information and that type of thing. So I think all those things we can do on the individual basis. I think what science is trying to do at the larger scale, protect lakes from, there's number, and groundwater too, really. There's some old contaminants, nitrogen and phosphorus. We know about them for a long time. They're recalcitrant problems. And we've got to talk about them and say we want to reduce them even more. That goes back to the wetlands. We found that farms that are in our watershed studies, we found that watersheds where the farms had up to 60 to 80% some wetlands buffers around them had lower pollution. So it's like, can we rebuild with nature? And can we do it? We can't have just 1 or 2 farms in a watershed do it, right? It has to be all the, as many farms as we can get. Build back with nature. And so that goes back to thinking about how do we look at their wetlands, and that supplies ecosystem habitat, by the way, as well, and as support improved water quality. And then look at a reasonable way to get the nitrogen and the phosphorus down. We need the nitrogen and phosphorus in the soil. We don't want it in the water, right? So we got to figure out how we do that. And this also controls algal blooms, because in the long term, in the short term, with algal blooms, we can start warning. We've got some early warning systems, especially if there's hazardous algal blooms. There's some rapid monitoring for the HABs, just like for the source tracking. We can do rapid testing to say, are there toxins present, right? So, if we get that monitoring going, we can warn people, well, you can't go in if you see a bloom, some citizen participation, take a picture of a bloom, send it to us. Let's start uploading what's happening. And then in the long term, we have to look at how we get these nutrients out of the water. And I remember in Florida, there was a study that where all the nutrients in the farmland, they had been over-applying nutrients, and springs were having an increase in all these phosphorus and nitrogen. When they stopped it, it took 10 years for that until they saw it at the springs, the decrease. And they'd stopped it 10 years ago. So we have to think, we can't think, okay, we're doing all this, and then they're gonna say, well, I didn't see any difference. The next year when I went to the lake, it still had all the algal blooms. Well, wait till your grandkids come to this lake. It's gonna be gorgeous and beautiful, right? We're not gonna have this anymore. So that's how we have to think about that.